corruption begins at home is the 15th video in the series. Why South Africa is getting poorer. Home is where we first learn values. It is where we learn fairness or favoritism, generosity or greed, respect or entitlement. And it is here, quietly, that corruption often plants its seed. Because corruption is not born solely in government boardrooms. It begins when a child watches a parent bend rules. It blossoms when a neighbor pays a bribe so a job gets done. It takes root when a community silently permits nepotism or favoritism. And by the time it reaches the national scale, by the time tenders are looted, institutions captured, and billions vanish, it is simply the grown-up version of what we first tolerated at home. In many South African households and neighborhoods, the first act of bending the rules is often small. A traffic officer waved away with a small banknote, a school administrator quietly promoting a relative, a public utility connection secured by influence rather than merit. These acts may feel personal and local, but they are seeds of a culture where connections matter more than honesty, and favor matters more than fairness. According to a 2024 report by the Human Sciences Research Council, HSRC, 14% of the general public said they had been solicited for bribes by public officials in the past 5 years. 20% said they lived in communities where bribes were required for basic services. And even more revealing, many respondents believed that ordinary people would not be punished for corruption. Just 46% thought they would face consequences. This means the message that rule-breaking is safe is being learned at home, on the street and in the community. When children see that a rule can be bypassed, they internalize the logic. If I know someone, I get ahead. If I pay, I get served. If I obey, I wait. The home is where notions of entitlement are nurtured. When a parent says, "You deserve the job because you're my son, daughter," or "We always help our family first," the message is clear. Merit is secondary to relationship. Research in African and South African contexts has pointed out that cultural structures of kinship often confuse family duty with public duty. In a society where extended family networks dominate, the pressure to repay loyalty or favor becomes normative. That creates an environment where nepotism is tolerated, if not expected, and when those patterns expand into public institutions, they warp procurement, appointments, and service delivery. What begins as the expectation of helping our own becomes the expectation of helping ourselves. When small-scale misconduct becomes accepted locally, the jump to institutional corruption is less a leap than a slide. The processes are similar: favoritism, bypassing rules, leveraging connections. Institutional capture thrives where individuals believe they will not be punished, and where ethics are optional. A study titled "Corruption in South Africa: An Ongoing Challenge to Good Governance" found that corruption persists because institutional ethical frameworks are at odds with the cultural norms widely held. In effect, the home teaches one set of values. Public institutions teach another. When these clash, the easy path wins. Take the infamous state capture scandal. Greed, network influence, tender manipulation became the common currency. This was not spontaneous, it was structural, built on networks of favoritism first normalized in smaller social settings. Consider the case of the Gupta family and their influence over major state entities during the presidency of Jacob Zuma. Contracts awarded not on competence but on loyalty, tenders inflated, public institutions hollowed out. These were manifestations of the same culture of who you know that shows up when a child watches a relative waved ahead of queue. Another example, local government in South Africa. The Nisna-Plet Herald reported the common view that corruption has become a culture, a normalized act, with residents describing how bribes, favoritism, and misuse of funds were everyday occurrences in basic services. These are not isolated events, they are predictable outcomes when systemic favoritism extends into structures meant to serve all. When corruption becomes the default behavior, the economy pays in three major ways. A. Lost trust, lost investment. Public trust in South Africa's institutions has collapsed. A survey found only 29% of South Africans trusted government officials in 2017, and that erosion of faith correlates with reduced investment and slower growth. B. Inefficient resource allocation. Money spent on inflated contracts, ghost workers, or mismanaged projects is money not spent building schools, clinics, or infrastructure. That means lower productivity and lower tax revenue in future. C. Exclusion and missed talent. When jobs and contracts go to networks instead of merit, ability is wasted and growth potential stymied. The economy becomes less dynamic and new entrants are discouraged. The HSRC's Culture Survey also found that 64% of the public believed corruption had a large impact on their families, indicating the micro-level financial impact of what appears as macro-level theft. If corruption begins at home, then reform must begin at home too. Families must model integrity, not only for children but for each other. Communities must refuse to reward favoritism and begin insisting on transparency and accountability. Institutions must align culture with policy. Ethical behavior must be as deeply embedded as procurement laws, and citizens must hold both their families and their leaders to the same standard. Because until the value of fairness replaces the value of favor, corruption will continue expanding. South Africa's slide into corruption was not inevitable. It was predictable, because the same patterns of rule-bending we tolerate at home, we tolerate in government. And so the rot never begins in the courthouse. It begins at the kitchen table. It begins when we say just this once won't matter. It begins when we favor the relative over the qualification. It begins when we believe connections matter more than competence. And it ends in lost billions, uprooted trust, and a nation poorer not just in wealth but in dignity. But there is hope. The same home that spawns corruption can also breed honesty. The same community that tolerates favoritism can also insist on fairness. If we change the micro, we change the macro. If corruption begins at home, then reform begins at home too. And so I ask you, what values are being modeled in your home, your family, your community? Because the future of South Africa, the one we all hope for, depends less on laws and more on our choices. Please like, share, leave your thoughts in the comments section, follow and subscribe, because together we can build a better South Africa.